West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Let's say, Mr. President, that you're a creepy billionaire, and it is your plan to capture and control the Supreme Court, to take it over, just like 19th century robber barons would have taken over and captured the Railroad Commission that set the rates for their own railroad.
Sounds like a pitch for a 1930s black and white movie.
Let's say you sent millions of dollars, secret dollars, to the Federalist Society for it to funnel money to its employee and your operative, Leonard Leo. Let's say that Leonard Leo got his cred with you and your right-wing billionaire pals when he helped you kill the nomination to the Supreme Court of President George W. Bush's friend and White House counsel, Harriet Miers, a political hit job from the far right against a Republican president's nominee, which produced none other than Sam Alito.
Okay, this doesn't sound like it's going to have a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington happy ending.
Let's say you also sent millions of dollars to Leonard Leo's Judicial Crisis Network, a fictitious name front group for another front group operating out of the same hallway, on the same floor, in the same building as the Federalist Society. Let's say you sent Judicial Crisis Network secret millions of dollars, checks as big as $15 million, checks as big as $17 million to run ads against Merrick Garland, to help Mitch McConnell block his confirmation by the Senate. Let's say that for your millions of dollars to the Federalist Society, the Federalist Society allowed you to use its name on a list of Supreme Court nominees that you and your right-wing billionaire pals and Leonard Leo cooked up. A list that the Federalist Society never considered or approved, never an agenda item, never a vote, but a list from some back room of the Federalist Society, pulled together by Leo and the billionaires, that candidate Trump promised to follow. And let's say that when Trump kept that promise and nominated your chosen ones, you sent millions more to the Judicial Crisis Network and to Mitch McConnell's political operation, not just to stop Merrick Garland, but to push the confirmation of your chosen ones, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. And let's say that to keep your chosen ones loyal and happy and entertained, you secretly paid for their personal lives. You paid for family tuitions. You bought family houses and let family members live rent-free. You paid for lifestyles of the rich and famous level vacations, including free travel to resorts on private jets, travel on private yachts, and you gave them expensive gifts, and you directed money to their spouses, and of course you hung out with them. And let's say that that last part, keeping them loyal and happy and entertained with all those gifts, was illegal. Illegal. Let's say that your loyalty gifts program required the chosen ones to file false federal disclosure forms and perhaps even false tax returns. Let's say that your loyalty gifts program might put you in trouble with the tax man for claiming false business expenses. How could that be? Let's say that the chosen ones were calling this bonanza of freebies personal hospitality. Personal hospitality, a term of art allowing non-disclosure under the disclosure laws. Let's say that they were all calling it personal hospitality, but you were calling the bonanza deductible business expenses of corporate yachts and jets. Then it wouldn't all add up. That's a lot of let's say, I know, but that's about what we're looking at with the Supreme Court right now.
Joining us now is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He's chair of the Subcommittee on Federal Courts. He's also the host of the podcast, Making the Case. Senator Whitehouse, you sure made the case today, and the case came down in the end to possible tax crimes.
Yeah, that is why both the Finance Committee, which oversees tax compliance, and the Judiciary Committee, which oversees the law that requires the justices to disclose gifts like this so that they fall into the right bucket. That's why both committees are investigating this. There is very possible illegal conduct, but in order to find that out, we've got to complete our investigation. And the billionaires, through their lawyers, have erected all kinds of stone walls.
Yeah, we've already heard Justice Thomas offer the excuse that the disclosure forms were more complicated than he thought, apparently, and he didn't quite fully understand the requirements and the directions for those disclosure forms. A very peculiar thing for a Supreme Court justice to say, given the complexity of matters that come before them, not to mention antitrust cases and all sorts of things. And of course, tax law comes before them, tax cases, appeals of tax cases and tax evasion cases. And so it is conceivable that we have Supreme Court justices ruling on tax cases at the Supreme Court that get there, who may have violated tax law themselves.
Yeah. And so, some of these questions are pretty straightforward, like, what income went to your spouse? You don't have to be a Supreme Court justice to answer that question. And yet these are the kinds of questions that tripped them up. They didn't trip them up because the questions were complicated. They tripped them up because they didn't want to give the answers.
You know, as your story unfolded today so dramatically in that form that you gave it, what you start to see is it gets to a point where Leonard Leo and company literally have more money than they know what to do with. They use it for massive influence, but then they've got more sitting around. Yes. And that's at the point where they start turning toward this. How about creating lifestyles of the rich and famous Supreme Court justices?
Yeah, just to give you an idea of the scale of this, Lisa Graves from the Center for Media and Democracy has done very good research into this, and she's at $580 million in her count of what was spent through this whole array of front groups in this court capture operation. $580 million sounds like a really big number, but then after that, a right-wing billionaire named Barry Seid gave Leonard Leo a slush fund of $1.6 billion to play with in his network of front groups. So if you were stunned at nearly $600 million going into the effort to capture the court, they blew through that by an additional $1 billion with the gift to Leonard Leo's slush fund.
It is Wednesday, the 20th of September of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? Will no one? And there still seems to be quite a few of them out there. And when I say priest, I mean any, man, person of the cloth. Man, woman, child even. Because I gotta tell you, some of these extremists are getting away with a little bit too much than what the founders originally intended, no matter what they tell you. And no better example of that than what we are seeing in the FedSoc MAGA court right now. That's the Supreme Court, by the way. And when I say FedSoc, we mean Federalist Society, Leonard Leo et al. Because it's not just Leonard Leo. Sure, he's a billionaire because he's gotten billions from, mega billionaires. What's another original intention of our founders? That mega extreme wealth would be the downfall of our representative government. And we should take care, and that was their original intent. And especially organized money. Corporations. Gotta fear those. So what did, I don't know, the insurgents do? It seems to me like the insurgency might have begun a lot longer than what we anticipated. And some might say, you know what? The Civil War has never ended. That insurgency has never ended. Yeah, they signed an instrument of defeat, but do they care? Do they respect it? Apparently not. Apparently to the point that we allow them to appease them. Sure, we'll name some of our great military bases out there in America and around the world after your generals. because we feel so bad about beating the crap out of you. Yeah. And with that, they erected monuments, started teaching their kids that, it wasn't about slavery, even though it said right there in their articles of separation from the United States of America, it was because of slavery. They said it. But now people don't believe it. It wasn't about slavery. It was about property. That's what DeSantis was trying to tell his kids in the private school. And they said, no way. No way, you idiot. They didn't say you idiot, but they thought it. According to accounts from those students who, years later, sat down and said, Ron DeSantis, that guy was one uppity mofo. And aggressive, too. Liked to party with the girls. What is it about those guys? I don't know. I was taught early by my professor father, you don't date your students. You just don't. And for a couple of reasons. Well, more than a couple, but, one was that you might go easy on him, and that would be untoward. That would be unethical. As if, dating a student is unethical to begin with. But, when you're a kid, you got to learn. Let's just put it this way. You never know where the manipulation is coming from, so don't even put yourself into the position of being manipulated. It's just wrong. You're either manipulating an innocent, naive student, or you're allowing yourself to be manipulated. I think that, we're surmising that 18-year-olds are adults. Where 22-year-olds have enough adult behind them to be able to be adults. In the power structure of student and professor. So what is it about these guys like DeSantis, who would actually go to parties and drink with underage girls? I don't know. Matt Gaetz? He wants to run for governor. Yeah, he's running away from something. And then all these right-wing MAGA Christian churches out there talking about, the Democrats are drinking the blood of babies. They're grooming our children to be homos and trans people. La, 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 la. Well, they're raping their kids. I got to tell you, there should be a background check on anybody who says that they want to be a Christian youth minister. Holy hell. I know. The incidence of it hasn't really increased. It's always been that way. We're just hearing about it more. Well, that makes me feel good. So it's been going on in a lot greater numbers than we even expected. We used to joke about it. Now the joke's kind of sick because it doesn't take into account the victims of these crimes. Well, let's joke about the youth minister in that Christian church. He abused another dozen kids. Well, what about the dozen kids? Can't joke about that. But what we will say is that there's something grossly hypocritical, and actually we know what it is. It's a diversionary tactic to, divert our eyes from the real crimes that are going on. And what does a Nazi do? Project their crimes onto their victims, onto their opponents. Joe Biden is decrepit and old? Yeah. I don't know. You saw the speech, or at least part of his speeches on the news of Joe at the UN. That was historic. He gets applause. When Trump forced his way in there, they booed him, laughed at his ass. They didn't really boo, but they laughed at him. Joe Biden brought respect of the United States back on the world stage. But if you hear the MAGA Nazis talk about it, he's the most corrupt person in the history of the world. And it's been covered up by the deep state. It's all on a chip on one of those space lasers orbiting the Earth right now. We just gotta find it. We gotta find the right space laser and get that chip. And then we'll be able to prove that Joe Biden has been the crime boss of every bad thing that's happened since, I don't know, he took office and his wife and daughter were killed tragically in an auto accident, and he nursed his boys back to health while he still held his seat and went back by train every weekend. All part of the big cover-up. Give me an effing break. These Nazis have been committing these crimes for decades. And I'm happy to go after some of their foot soldiers like MTG Berbert Getz et al. And we're looking at you too, Biggs. And Tuberville. Let me say a little something about Tuberville. He's upset that Fetterman is wearing shorts and a hoodie. Just, do I have to be reminded of my college days when all these student athletes coming into the locker room looking like shit? I'll just take the Fetterman time. He'll stop dressing like shit when you guys stop acting like shit. All right? Fair trade? Tuberville? I don't know. I would say never trust a MAGA Nazi wearing a tie. Can't say a suit jacket because then you got like Jordan, and I know he's not a senator, and the House rules are different. But no one talks about that. What about the monstrosity attire that a cinema wore? I mean, she was wearing sweatshirts, torn around the neck, hanging off a shoulder, with some, I don't know, weird graphic art on it, with a statement. I don't know. They had to, suspend the rules on attire for that because, yeah, they needed her vote. Joe Manchin is complaining about Fetterman wearing a hoodie. I'm going to make sure that we have some sort of standards. Well, no shit, Sherlock, and last I heard, you're not a Democratic member anymore. You're an independent. Caucus with the Dems. Give me a break. And all the while, the insurgents that were part of this violent overthrow of the United States of America are talking about defunding the investigations into them, proposing bills to stop the weaponization of the government, apparently because since they weaponize the government, every action that occurs that comes after them is a weaponization against them. Well, let the law be the law. Let representative government be representative government, and ultimately, you got to punch the Nazis to maintain, well, our way of life. Or else. Okay, enough of the rant. What do we have in store for you here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine Smothered Benedict Wednesdays? Well, yeah. Old Sheldon Whitehouse dressed down the corruption. Do you see what I just did there? Dressed down the corruption of the FedSoc Supreme Court. Yep. And the very possible illegal conduct of the billionaires funding their lavish lifestyles. On the rest of the menu, a Republican book banning bill in Texas has been blocked by a Trump-appointed conservative judge, But on the same day, a Texas middle school teacher was fired for reading The Diary of Anne Frank to her class. Oh, yeah. Some parent complained, and they fired the teacher. A white supremacist pled guilty to threatening the jury and witnesses in the Tree of Life Synagogue massacre trial. You know, that's a virus that's been going around, too. And Musk's unfounded attacks on a Las Vegas reporter are a new low in his thuggery. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the German government banned a neo-Nazi group with close links to the U.S., meaning the same group in the U.S. Then the German government conducted raids on their compounds in 10 German states. And Polish police briefly detained an opposition Polish lawmaker, thereby violating her parliamentary immunity, after she interrupted a campaign speech by the right-wing prime minister. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. Across the page from that chat room link to the left and down just a skosh is the link to our Patreon page, and you know what to do there. And please do, because we do need the help, and thank you for helping us. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, wherever, you can do so at Netroots Radio, and Tom takes care of those. And it's not everywhere, but you'll find us at Netroots Radio, and thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, I don't know, Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook. You can follow me all there. All of those. You can follow me at Justice Putnam. And incidentally, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. So you are able to read the actual articles and see the actual clips that we draw such great inspiration from here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart. Oh, no, not Spreaker. Oh, yes, on Spreaker, just not Stitcher. That's right, not Stitcher, because we know what happened with SiriusXM. I should mention, and I need to get a hold of Tom and let him know, that we actually had a suggestion that maybe David's show and this show should be included as a block over on SiriusXM, and how do we make that happen? And I really don't know. I mean, I have some ideas, but Tom would know. So we'll need to consult Tom and see what that might entail. Mention it to David, too, because, maybe he doesn't want to be there, but maybe he does. We should. I think he was there before. Okay. Regardless, do pick up podcasts at all those places because, that would be nice. And I guess I should mention, which I haven't for a long time, if there's some sort of rating on any of those, like I don't know, like us. Okay. Let us now tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and it is by Sarah K. Burris out of Raw Story, and then a follow-up over at the Houston Chronicle online platform, and that would be by Ariana Garcia, and this one by Sarah K. Burris states that the Texas State Representative James Tallarico said that the Republican bill to ban books in the state has been blocked by a conservative judge. The judge, Alan Albright, was appointed to the federal bench by then-President Donald Trump in 2018. He called the bill an unconstitutional law that could lead to banning classic works of literature. Well, the state has already said they will appeal. They also asked the judge to allow the law to go into effect pending appeal. It was denied. Now, the reason for this bill is that they want to rank every book that's ever been sold by any vendor based on sexual content. Well, two independent bookstores, Houston's Blue Willow Bookshop and Austin's Book People, as well as a coalition of professional publishing organizations, sued the state over the law, arguing that it was not only unconstitutional, but also created an undue burden on private businesses, was unenforceable, and was too broadly written. The move came as Harris County commissioners voted unanimously to approve a resolution for the public library system to become a book sanctuary. There is now a network of 2,828 book sanctuaries across the United States. Well, that's nice, because as the follow-up, I mentioned here in the Houston Chronicles online platform by Ariana Garcia, a Texas middle school teacher was fired after assigning an unapproved illustrated version of Anne Frank's diary to her 8th grade reading class. And the Hampshire Fannett ISD, independent school district located south of Beaumont, released a statement confirming the teacher was sent home on Wednesday after reading a passage from Anne Frank's diary in which Frank wrote about male and female genitalia. An investigation into the incident has since ensued, so they fired her ass yesterday. Now, while district officials claim the adaptation of Anne Frank's diary was not approved, it was included on a reading list sent to parents at the start of the school year, and the investigation will determine if the teacher pivoted from the original approved curriculum or if administrators were aware of the book being part of the class. At the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. A self-proclaimed white supremacist pled guilty yesterday, Tuesday, to making online threats toward the jury and witnesses at the trial of a man who killed 11 congregants at a Pittsburgh synagogue, the U.S. Justice Department said, as part of his plea agreement in federal court for West Virginia's Northern District. Hardy Carol Lloyd admitted that the actual or perceived Jewish faith of the government witnesses and victims in the trial of Robert Bowers prompted him to target the jury and witnesses. Age 45 of Fallensby, West Virginia, Lloyd faces more than 6 years in prison if the plea agreement is accepted by the court. The Justice Department described Lloyd as a self-proclaimed leader of a white supremacy movement. They said Lloyd, who was arrested on August 10th, set threatening social media posts and emails, along with comments on websites during Bowers' trial. Lloyd pleaded guilty to obstruction of the due administration of justice. Bowers was sentenced to death last month after a jury determined that capital punishment was appropriate. Smith of The Daily Beast brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Dog whistle virtuoso Elon Musk is at it again, setting loose the bigots, blowhards, and anti-Semites of his ex-social media platform, formerly known as Twitter, with a misleading post reaching millions of his frothing followers. Prior to this week's widely publicized meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, a conversation which included, surprise, a call for Musk to roll back the anti-Semitism on X, Musk weighed in on a strange Las Vegas homicide case. He characteristically got his facts wrong, didn't bother to clarify or call up his dogs, even as they smeared, and threatened a good young reporter and her employer, the Las Vegas Review-Journal. It is nothing new from Musk, just the latest instance which finds him exercising his freedom of speech on his personal platform and offering opening lines for those who cannot wait to wave their anti-woke and anti-Semitic flags. This time, the sleight of hand played a heinous homicide for political sport. On the morning of August 14th, 64-year-old Andreas Probst suffered fatal injuries after being struck by a car while riding his bicycle. The newspaper reported that police suspected a hit-and-run driver speeding in a stolen vehicle. As the investigation continued, reporter Sabrina Schnurr published a follow-up article on August 18th that included an interview with Probst's widow and daughter, who described the victim as a loving family man and retired police chief from Bell, California. On the 31st of August, the Review-Journal reported that police investigators had found an incriminating video taken by one of the suspects, indicating the hit-and-run had been an intentional homicide. The 17-year-old suspect, his name withheld because of his age, is being held on a murder charge as police continue their search for the passenger in the vehicle who shot the graphic video, accurately described as a snuff film, and that video has since gone viral. On his website, the Review-Journal updated the headline on the August 18th article to reflect the changed status of the case. But that did not stop Musk, who then reposted to 157.2 million followers a misleading graphic. And then thanks in part to Musk's irresponsible mischief and catcalls from loony conspiracy stoker Laura Loomer, the accurate Review-Journal news coverage morphed into an attempt to downplay a homicide of a retired white cop. Toxic posts accused the newspaper of purposely tanking elements of the story after it did the journalistically responsible thing and changed an online headline to reflect a new status in the evolving case. Well, this is just the latest in Musk's, thuggery, is it not? Let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Not So Equal. There's no better starting place for the creators of drama than visceral desires from deep in the human psyche. In a world rife with injustice, the producers of the original 80s TV show, The Equalizer, understood the power of a persona with unfettered franchise to bring justice, especially where institutions have failed. Unlike in politics, where this usually goes horribly wrong, in fiction we get a hero like Robert McCall, who this time around in The Equalizer 3 stumbles injured into a remote Italian coastal village where the local mafia is involved in an international drug ring believed to be raising money for jihadis. It's game on when the supposedly retired McCall has a phone number that picks up in Langley or somewhere. Operatives are then on their way as he befriends the townsfolk who are being tormented by an array of violent, beyond redemption sociopaths who don't know until it's too late that they've messed with the wrong guy. If this sounds pretty generic, you may not have seen the first two Equalizers or be familiar in general with Denzel Washington, whose stage presence borders on omnipotence. While the violence in this one can put some horror films to shame, director Antoine Fuqua uses it surgically and sparingly. It's no John Wick. The violence is interwoven into complex storylines and subplots, and especially into McCall's life situation, of which we know some tragic facts, but little of his inner life and struggle for belonging. Support kudos go to Dakota Fanning as CIA agent Emma, and to Gina Scoladero as McCall's friend Amina, as well as the Italian actors doing the henchmen. Stunningly shot and with an ominous and insistent soundtrack, The Equalizer 3 is a film with few equals in its genre. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to this edition of PCD Soundbites. I'm Karen Ngowe, filling in for your host, Latoya Simmons. Current guidelines recommend adults get at least 2.5 hours of moderate-intensity aerobic activity a week, like brisk walking. But many Americans don't get enough physical activity to meet this guideline, which can lead to chronic disease and premature death. Joining me today is Dr. Susan Carlson, a lead epidemiologist in CDC's Division of Nutrition, Physical Activity, and Obesity. We'll be discussing her research, which aims to estimate the percentage of U.S. deaths attributed to inadequate levels of physical activity. Thank you for being here, Susan.
Thank you for inviting me, Karen.
Susan, give us a brief overview of your study.
As Karen stated, the current aerobic physical activity guideline recommends that adults participate weekly in at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity, or its equivalent for substantial health benefits. The health benefits include such things as lowering the risk of premature death, heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, certain types of cancers, and depression. In our study, we first examined what influence physical activity levels below the current guideline have on premature mortality, and we wanted to look at whether this association differed by age. The second purpose was really to estimate the percentage of deaths that are attributable to levels of physical activity that are inadequate to meet the current guideline.
What did your research reveal about the association between inadequate physical activity and premature death among American adults?
So in a nationally representative sample of U.S. adults, we found that adults with levels of physical activity inadequate to meet current guidelines had an increased risk of premature death. Overall, we found that 8.3% of deaths were attributed to inadequate levels of physical activity. Our findings suggest that if you increase adults' physical activity levels to meet the current guidelines, this is likely one way to reduce the risk of premature death in the United States.
What did you find when you looked at this association in different age groups?
we did not find a significant association between physical activity level and mortality in adults aged 25 to 39. However, for those aged 40 to 69 and 70 or older, we found that not meeting the guideline was associated with an increased risk of premature mortality.
How did these findings compare to previous similar studies?
We found that our estimates were similar or slightly lower when comparing to similar studies that have examined this association. In general, our estimates of the percent of deaths attributable to inadequate levels of physical activity is not practically different from other studies.
Do you think researchers have become better at estimating the percentage of deaths attributed to inadequate physical activity?
Estimating the percentage can be challenging. Many of the previous studies that have provided these estimates have done so by combining estimates across different sources. This can really bias results, especially if there are differences in the populations or if the physical activity measure differs. When you use a survival analysis conducted in a single population, which is what we did in this study, you can overcome a lot of these biases and improve your estimates. Facilitating the linking of CDC survey data from systems like the National Health Interview Survey to mortality data can really help researchers explore these issues.
How do you think this research can be used to help get adults moving and reduce the risk of premature death associated with inadequate physical activity?
So we found in this study that a significant portion of deaths were attributed to lower levels of physical activity. By estimating the public health burden of low levels of physical activity, this can be important for setting research and program priorities and for public health planning at the national, state, and local level. Ultimately, individuals make the decision to be active. However, this decision can be made easier by programs and policies that provide opportunities for physical activity and by making communities more activity-friendly. By working collaboratively across different sectors, communities across the nation can help to increase physical activity levels and potentially reduce the risk of premature death.
Thank you, Susan. You can read her study, Percentage of Deaths Associated with Inadequate Physical Activity in the United States, online at cdc.gov/PCD. The findings and conclusions in this report are those of the author and do not necessarily represent the official position of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1830. That was the day that the Reverend Richard Allen brought black leaders together at his Mother Bethel AME Church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They met to discuss the rising white violence and discrimination toward black free residents in northern cities. 40 people answered Allen's call, representing 7 states. The delegates included many of the leading black ministers and abolitionists of the day. Those who attended risked personal harm as white mobs threatened the delegates. Due to the danger, the group met in secret starting on September 15th. Then, on this day, they began open sessions. For 5 days, the delegates considered multiple responses to the conditions black Northerners faced. They founded the American Society for Free Persons of Color for improving their conditions in the United States, for purchasing lands, and for establishment of a settlement in the province of Canada. The organization emphasized pushing for legal protections for black residents in the United States. They focused on education as a means of uplifting and improving the lives of black citizens. But delegates also supported the idea of an outlet to Canada for those black families who wanted to leave for their safety. The National Convention reconvened several times over the next 3 decades. Multiple meetings were held at the state and local levels. These meetings gave black leaders a chance to devise coordinated strategies to stand up against the increasing violence and restrictive laws of the North, and to call for an end of slavery in the South. One outcome of these meetings was the founding of labor schools to train black students in the skilled trades as a means to gain economic independence. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 45 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only around 72 degrees, so a considerable cooling from what we've had even from yesterday. Partly cloudy skies throughout the day with winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the low to mid-40s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then sunny skies tomorrow with highs in the low to mid-70s. Winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And we still have rain forecasts beginning late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, and continuing apparently for several days. We'll see if that changes. Ragweed pollen has now been marked as high here in the little town of Rogue River, Oregon, and the air quality index for the region, though, is in the good range at 24 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is in the moderate range and has ticked up since yesterday and is now at level 5. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.06 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that makes up the Weather Underground. London is 65 degrees with rain. Paris is 76 and mostly cloudy with an advisory for heavy rain and flooding. Rome is 82 degrees and fair, though they have a high wind advisory. Kabul is 70 degrees and clear. Kyiv is 70 and cloudy. Hong Kong is 85 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 78 and cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 50 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees with a health advisory for smoke from the wildfires. Chicago, Illinois is 66 degrees and partly cloudy, and New York, New York is 68 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Kirsten Grieshaber of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. The German government yesterday, Tuesday, banned the neo-Nazi group Hammerskins Germany and raided homes of dozens of its members. The group is an offshoot of an American right-wing extremist group and plays a prominent role across Europe. I guess American right-wing extremist group is a nice way of saying they're neo-Nazis too. The Hammerskins Germany is an offshoot of the Hammerskins Nation, founded in the United States in 1988, according to the Interior Ministry. It plays a prominent role in the right-wing extremist scene in Europe. Worldwide members of this association refer to themselves as brothers, practicing their subcultural way of life. The group also sees itself as the elite of the right-wing extremist skinhead scene, according to the ministry. The ban of the Hammerskins Germany is a hard blow against organized right-wing extremism, Interior Minister Nancy Faeser said, adding that the ban included the association's regional chapters and its sub-organization Crew 38. In Germany, the group comprises of around 130 members. During the early morning raids in 10 states, about 700 police officers searched the homes of 28 group members. It was not immediately clear if any members were detained. According to our findings so far, significant amounts of right-wing extremist devotional objects have been seized in addition to cash, the minister said. I think devotional objects means Hitler memorabilia. Ahead of the ban, the German federal and state governments cooperated intensively for more than a year, Faeser said, adding that we also work closely with our American partners. The core element of the group's ideology is the propagation of a racial doctrine based on Nazi ideology. The purpose of the association, Hammerskins Germany, is to consolidate its right-wing extremist worldview, particularly through concerts, where it tries to appeal to non-members and then radicalize them. The right-wing extremist orientation of the internationally networking group manifests itself in particular through the distribution of recordings of right-wing extremist and anti-Semitic music, the organization of right-wing extremist concerts, and the sale of right-wing extremist merchandise, the ministry said. The ban of Hammerskins Germany is the 20th ban of a right-wing extremist association by the German Interior Ministry. Right-wing extremism remains the greatest extremist threat to the basic democratic order in Germany, Faeser told reporters in Berlin.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Polish police briefly detained an opposition Polish lawmaker yesterday, Tuesday, violating her parliamentary immunity after she interrupted a campaign speech by Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki. Critics of Morawieki's right-wing government denounced the behavior of the police, calling it an example of the deterioration of the rule of law. The lawmaker, Kinga Gajewski, was using a megaphone to interrupt a speech by Morawiecki in Otwock, a town near Warsaw. The broadcaster TVN24 reported that opposition politicians were holding a rally near one by Morawiecki. Gajewski used her megaphone to address listeners with information about an alleged visa scandal involving some consular workers who were reported to have taken bribes in return for giving visas to Africans and Asians. Poland's Law and Justice ruling party has sought to downplay the scandal as it fights for an unprecedented third consecutive term. Marcin Kerwinski, the Secretary General of the Civic Coalition Electoral Alliance, to which the 32-year-old Gajewski belongs, denounced the detention. The police detained her, he said, even though she repeated that she was a member of parliament. A video posted by Donald Tusk, the main opposition leader, shows police putting her into a van, even as people told police that she is a lawmaker. Police later said they had not been aware at first that she was a lawmaker. I bet. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know, Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.